Imani Graves had photographed 247 weddings. She knew exactly what love looked like through a lens. The way a groom's hand shook when he saw his bride. The way mothers pressed tissues to their eyes before the vows even started. The way strangers slow danced like nobody was watching. She just didn't believe in it anymore. Not since Marcus left her standing at the altar in a white dress in front of 180 people on a Saturday afternoon in New Orleans. Not since she drove home alone, still in her veil, stopping at a drive-thru because she hadn't eaten since the morning. That was 2 years ago. She was fine now. That's what she told people. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you're returning, thank you. Your support means everything. Now, stay until the end, drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. The first time Declan Rhodes walked into one of her exhibitions, Imani didn't notice him. That was the truth she would return to later, when everything got complicated. She had been adjusting a print on the far wall of the Treme Gallery, a shot she'd taken of an elderly couple renewing their vows in their backyard. The husband was crying. The wife was laughing. Their hands were locked together like they'd never once considered letting go. 53 years together, and he still cried at the sight of her in a dress. It was Imani's favorite image in the whole collection. She believed in other people's love. That part of her still worked fine, just not her own. This one stopped me cold. She turned. A man stood in front of the print she'd just straightened, tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair that looked like he'd run his hand through it several times that morning and stopped caring about the result. He wore a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No yakit, no tie. He looked like someone who was supposed to be somewhere important and wandered in here instead. It usually does, Imani said. He turned to look at her. His eyes were light brown, almost amber in the warm gallery lighting. Did you take it? I take all of them. It's my exhibition. He looked back at the print. 50 years together, you think? Maybe 60. 53. I asked him. Something moved across his face. Just slightly. You asked. I always ask. The number matters. He nodded slowly, like she had said something that meant more than she intended it to. Then he moved on to the next print without another word. He stayed for a full hour. He didn't buy anything. Didn't ask for a card. When she finally looked up from a conversation near the door, he was gone. She forgot about him by the next morning. He came back 3 weeks later. This time Imani was behind a camera rather than standing near her work. She was shooting a private corporate event on the rooftop of a hotel in the central business district. Black tie, open bar, the kind of room where everyone pretended the food was the reason they came and not the business cards changing hands every 4 minutes. She moved through it the way she always moved through these events, quiet and patient, waiting for the real moments to surface between the performed ones. She caught him in her viewfinder before she recognized him. He was standing slightly apart from a cluster of men in suits, holding a glass of something amber and not drinking it, just holding it, looking out at the city below. There was a stillness to him that read differently than the rest of the room, and her finger pressed a shutter before her brain fully caught up to the decision. She reviewed that shot later that night, sitting on her kitchen floor with her laptop and a bowl of red beans, and rice her neighbor Mr. Rode had left outside her door. She almost deleted it. His profile against the New Orleans skyline, the city lights behind him, his jaw set, his eyes somewhere far away from that rooftop, and everything on it. She didn't delete it. His name was Declan Rhodes. The event coordinator told her the next morning when Imani mentioned the man in the photograph while delivering the proofs. The coordinator laughed. That's the client. He's the one who hired you. Tech money, mostly out of San Francisco. He's been relocating some operations down here. Imani looked at the shot again that evening. She told herself it was a strong photograph. Clean composition. Good light. That was all it was. The third time she saw him was at her next exhibition 6 weeks later, a larger show at a gallery in the Arts District. The room was full and warm and loud with a specific kind of energy that comes when wine is free and the art is good. She was standing near the back, when she felt that particular shift that happens when someone enters a space and changes the temperature of it without saying a word. She turned, and he was already looking at her from across the room. He came toward her, not rushed, not slow, just deliberate, like a man who had already decided something and was following through on it. "Third time," he said when he reached her. "I noticed. I want you to know I'm not a stalker." "I know you're not," she said. "Stalkers don't look that guilty." He smiled. It was a kind of smile that took a moment to arrive, like it had to pass through something heavy before it reached his face. "I've Declan. I know who you are. You hired me for the rooftop event." "I did." "You could have introduced yourself then." He looked down at his glass. "I almost did." She waited. "You were photographing someone near the bar," he said. "An older woman. She was laughing at something, and you were just standing there, completely still, waiting. I watched you wait for almost 4 minutes for that one shot." He paused. "I didn't want to interrupt that." Imani was quiet for a moment. "Did you get it?" he asked. "The shot you were waiting for?" "Yes," she said. He nodded like he already knew. "I figured you would." They talked for nearly an hour. About New Orleans, which he was still learning block by block. About San Francisco, which he said he missed less than he expected. About what it meant to spend a life watching other people's most important moments through a piece of glass. That last part came from him, and she felt it land somewhere she wasn't ready for. "That's not what it is," she said. "What is it then?" She thought about it honestly. "Witnessing. There's a difference between watching and witnessing." He looked at her for a long moment. "Is there?" She didn't answer that one. 2 weeks later, he hired her for a private dinner at his house in the Garden District, a house he'd purchased 4 months ago and still hadn't finished furnishing. She arrived early and walked through the rooms before the guests came. 4 of them were completely bare, just with floors and afternoon light coming in through tall windows. "You haven't decorated," she said. He stood in the doorway behind her. "I haven't decided what I want yet." She raised her camera and shot the empty room. The light pooling on the floor, the window, the clean absence of everything. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "Because empty rooms have a feeling," she said. "Most people only photograph the full ones." He was quiet for a beat. "What feeling does this one have?" She looked at the bare floor, the tall window, the light just sitting there with nowhere particular to go. "Waiting," she said, "like something is about to begin." He didn't respond. But when she glanced back at him, he was looking at her, not the room. She turned back to her camera and didn't acknowledge it. The dinner that night went the way those dinners always went. 15 guests. Candlelight doing the work that candlelight was designed to do. Conversations that started formal and loosened up by the second glass of wine. Imani moved through it all the way she'd learned to move through rooms that weren't hers, present enough to catch the moments, invisible enough that people forgot she was there. She was good at being forgotten in a room. She had decided that was a professional skill and not something worth examining too closely. Declan was a different kind of host than she expected. He didn't work the room the way wealthy men usually did at their own events, moving from cluster to cluster, laughing a half second before the joke landed, performing ease. He stayed in conversations longer than necessary. He listened in a way that made people lean toward him, without realizing they were doing it. At one point, she watched the older man across the table tell him something that made Declan go completely still, and he reached over and put his hand briefly on the man's arm, and the older man nodded like something had been settled between them. She photographed it without thinking. At the end of the night, after the guests had gone and the catering staff were clearing the long table, he walked her to her car. The Garden District was quiet at that hour. Warm air, the smell of jasmine coming from somewhere down the block, the old houses sitting heavy and lit in the dark. "I'd like to hire you again," he said when they reached her car. "You have my rate card." "That's not what I mean." She stopped walking, turned to look at him. The streetlight caught the line of his jaw. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour of the night. "I don't do personal shoots," she said carefully. "I know." He put his hands in his pockets. "I mean, I'd like to get dinner. With you, not as a client." The jasmine smell drifted between them. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. Imani looked at him for a long moment. He didn't fidget, didn't fill the silence with extra words to soften the ask. He just waited, which she was learning was simply how he was built. "I'm not in a place for that," she said. "Okay," he said. "Just that?" "Okay." She got in her car. He stepped back from the door and let her pull away without another word. She watched him in her rear-view mirror, standing on the sidewalk under the streetlight, hands still in his pockets, watching her taillights until she turned the corner. She told herself that was the end of it. It wasn't. He called her office 3 days later and booked her for another corporate event. Then another 2 weeks after that. Always professional. Always correct. He never mentioned dinner again. He paid on time, left detailed feedback that was actually useful, and treated her the way a good client treats someone whose work they genuinely respect. It would have been easier if he'd pushed. She knew how to handle men who pushed. She didn't know what to do with one who simply showed up and waited. Her best friend Rochelle noticed first. The way Rochelle always noticed things first and then sat on the information until she felt the moment was right to deploy it. They were at Dookie Chase's on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of meal that started at 1 o'clock and was somehow still happening at 4. Imani working through a plate of fried chicken and Rochelle watching her with a specific expression that meant something was coming. "Who is he?" Rochelle said. Imani didn't look up from her food. "Who is who? Whoever is making you eat like that." Imani looked down. She had cleaned her plate completely, which she never did, and had moved on to the cornbread without noticing. She put the cornbread down. "There's a client," she said. Rochelle picked up her sweet tea. Hum. "It's not like that. You just ate an entire plate of fried chicken and 2 pieces of cornbread without looking up once. It's exactly like that." Imani told her about Declan, the exhibitions, the rooftop photograph she almost deleted, the empty rooms, the dinner he'd asked for and accepted her no to without argument. Rochelle was quiet through all of it, which meant she was taking it seriously. "He just said okay?" she asked when Imani finished. "He just said okay." Rochelle set down her glass. "Imani, baby, that man is not just a client. I know that. And you're scared." "I know that too." Rochelle reached across the table and covered her hand. "Marcus was a boy who couldn't hold the weight of loving you. That is not the same thing as love being dangerous." Imani looked out the window at the Sunday afternoon street. A family was walking past, a father lifting a small girl onto his shoulders, the girl laughing with her whole body. Her chest did something complicated. "I'm not ready," she said. "Nobody's ever ready," Rochelle said. "They just go anyway." Imani went home and looked at the photograph again, the one she'd taken of Declan on the rooftop, his profile against the city, the untouched glass in his hand, the distance in his eyes. She thought about his brother for the first time. She didn't know about his brother yet. That would come later. What she thought about was the empty rooms in his house, and the word she had used without planning to, waiting. She had looked at bare floors and open windows and seen waiting, and he had heard it and looked at her instead of the room, and she had turned away because she understood exactly what that meant and was not ready to let it mean anything. She put the laptop away and went to bed. She lay there for a long time before she slept. 3 weeks later, she called his number, and when he answered, she said, "That dinner, if it's still something you want, I have a Thursday open." A pause. Brief. "Thursday works," he said. They went to a small Creole place on Magazine Street that she loved and he'd never been to. They sat in a corner booth, and the waiter brought bread, and she learned things. He had grown up in Portland, Oregon, the second of 2 sons. His father was an engineer. His mother taught high school English, and still did. He'd started his first company at 23 with his brother Sean, working out of Sean's apartment on a folding table with 2 laptops and a shared phone plan. She noticed a shift when he said Sean's name. Small, but there. Like something in the room changed pressure. "Where's Sean now?" she asked. He looked at the bread basket. "He died 4 years ago. Heart condition nobody knew about." He said it straight, no decoration. He was 32. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. "The company was his idea. I just had the technical side." He had the vision. He picked up his water glass. I think about that a lot. Whether I'm running his company or mine. She didn't say anything. She just let it sit there between them the way it needed to. After a moment, he looked up at her. I don't usually say that out loud. You don't have to apologize for that, she said. He studied her face like he was trying to determine something. You lost someone too, he said. Not death. Something else. Her jaw tightened just slightly. What makes you say that? The way you photograph weddings but don't believe in them anymore. You can see the difference between someone who never believed and someone who used to. The candlelight sat between them. Someone left me, she said finally, at the altar 2 years ago. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say anything immediately, which she found she was grateful for. That's a specific kind of damage, he said at last. Yes, she said. It is. They sat with that honesty between them like it was something solid they had both placed on the table. By the end of the night, she knew she was in trouble. Not the bad kind she was used to, a different kind entirely, which was somehow more frightening. They fell into something that neither of them named. Thursday dinners that sometimes stretched into Friday mornings, sitting on his porch with coffee while the garden district woke up around them. Walks through the French Quarter on Sunday afternoons where he would stop in front of things that caught his eye and she would photograph them without being asked. Phone calls that started as quick check-ins and turned into an hour without either of them noticing. He came to her darkroom once. She worked with film when she wanted to think, digital when she needed speed, and the darkroom in the back of her studio on Frenchman Street was the most private room in her life. Nobody came in there. Not Rochelle. Not her mother when she visited from Baton Rouge. She invited him in on a Wednesday afternoon without fully understanding why she did it. He stood in the red light and watched her work in complete silence for 40 minutes. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to help, just stood with his arms crossed loosely, watching the images emerge and develop her trays the way you watch something you've been waiting to understand finally start to make sense. When she hung the last print to dry, he looked at it for a long moment. It was a shot from the rooftop, his profile against the city, the untouched glass, the distance in his eyes. He knew immediately it was him. She watched him look at himself from the outside and felt her chest go tight. You kept it, he said. It's a good photograph. He turned to look at her in the red light. Imani. Don't, she said quietly. He didn't. He looked back at the print. Okay, he said. That word again. The one she couldn't figure out how to defend herself against. She started noticing the ways he paid attention. Not the grand gestures that men offered when they were performing interest, the small, specific things. He remembered that she took her coffee with 1 sugar and oat milk, not because she was precious about it, but because regular milk made her stomach hurt, and he'd heard her mention it once 3 weeks before and simply remembered. He texted her when there was a light situation she would want to photograph, a storm front coming in over Lake Pontchartrain one evening, the way the sky went green and gold and strange before the rain. He never asked her to respond. Just sent it and let her do what she wanted with it. She drove to the lake and photographed that sky for 2 hours. It was one of the best shoots of her year. She didn't tell him that, but she sent him one of the prints without a note, and he texted back a single line. I knew you'd make something out of it. Her mother called on a Tuesday, and Imani made the mistake of mentioning his name once, briefly, in a context that was clearly professional, and her mother Dolores was quiet for exactly 1 second before she said, What does he look like? Nanga. I'm just asking a question, Imani Marie. He's a client. You said his name like he's not just a client. Imani looked at the ceiling of her studio. He's tall, light brown hair. He's got these amber eyes. Dolores made a sound that was not quite a word. He's kind, Imani said before she could stop herself. Like genuinely kind, not performing it. Her mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Baby, not every man is Marcus. I know that. Do you? Imani didn't answer. Your grandmother used to say the heart doesn't stop wanting because it got hurt. Dolores said, it just gets more careful about what it reaches for. Careful is fine. Close is not the same thing as careful. After she hung up, Imani sat in the middle of her studio floor for a while. Around her were prints in various stages, equipment cases, the smell of fixer solution, and old wood floors. The life she had built after Marcus left, small and controlled and entirely hers. She had built it to be safe. She hadn't noticed until right now that safe and lonely could look identical from the inside. It was Rochelle who finally said the word out loud that Imani had been refusing to think in complete sentences. They were at Rochelle's house on a Saturday. Rochelle cooking a big pot of gumbo that had been going since morning, her 2 kids running through the house, the television on in the background with nobody watching it. The warm, loud, full kind of afternoon that Imani loved being inside of, even when it made her aware of the quiet she went home to. "You love him," Rochelle said. Not a question. She said it the way she announced things she had known for a while, and was simply now choosing to file officially. Imani was sitting at the kitchen counter. She opened her mouth. "Don't," Rochelle said, stirring the gumbo. Imani closed her mouth. "You love him and you're terrified and you're waiting for him to do something wrong. So you have a reason to end it before it gets real." Rochelle pointed the wooden spoon at her. "That is what you are doing." "That is not what I am doing." "What are you doing then?" Imani looked at the counter. "Being careful." Rochelle turned back to the stove. "There's careful, and then there's punishing a man for something another man did. Declan Rhodes has not put a foot wrong with you one single time. Has he?" Imani was quiet. "Has he?" Rochelle repeated. "No," Imani said. "Then what are you waiting for?" She didn't have an answer that held up. That evening she drove home and sat in her car in front of her studio for a long time. The street outside was doing what Frenchman Street always did on a Saturday night, filling up, music drifting out of the clubs, people moving toward the sound. Life happening at full volume 50 feet from where she sat in the dark and quiet of her own head. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again and typed. "Can I come over?" His response came in under a minute. "Doors open." She drove to the Garden District. He met her on the porch before she reached the steps, like he'd been watching for a car. He was in a gray T-shirt and dark jeans, barefoot, holding 2 cups of something warm. He handed her one without a word. She sat on the porch steps, and he sat beside her, and they looked out at the quiet street. "I'm scared," she said after a while. She didn't look at him when she said it. "I know," he said. "I don't know how to do this without waiting for it to fall apart." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going anywhere, Imani." She turned to look at him then. The porch light caught the angles of his face. He looked at her with that same steadiness she had been trying to photograph and failing to fully capture, because it wasn't a visual thing. It was something you had to be near to feel. "How do you know that?" she asked. "Because I've been patient for the better part of a year," he said. "Impatient men don't last that long." She almost smiled. Almost. She put her head on his shoulder. He didn't move, just stayed exactly where he was and let her be there. The night settled around them. Music from somewhere down the street. The smell of jasmine again. She thought about Rochelle's gumbo and her mother's voice and the empty rooms in this house, and a photograph she almost deleted. She thought about 53 years and a man who still cried at the sight of his wife in a dress. She thought, maybe, for the first time in 2 years, she thought, maybe, and didn't immediately take it back. The rooftop was his idea. He had been working on the top floor of his building for months. A space he converted from unused storage into something open and quiet, with low wooden furniture and string lights and a view of the city that on a clear night went all the way to the river. He'd shown it to her once in passing, and she walked around the edges of it with her camera and not said much, which he had learned meant she was absorbing something. He invited her up on a Friday evening in late autumn when the air had finally broken from a heat and New Orleans was doing that thing it did for about 6 weeks a year, where the temperature was perfect and the sky went colors at dusk that had no names in any language she knew. She brought her camera, out of habit. He had a small table set up near the railing. Wine, bread, a few things from the Italian place on Magazine Street that she loved. Nothing performed about it. Just simple and intentional, which was exactly how he did everything. They ate and talked, and the sky did what she knew it was going to do, going from blue to amber to something deep and bruised at the edges that made her put down her glass and reach for the camera without excusing herself. He watched her move along the railing, shooting the sky, shooting the city below, and she could feel him watching, but it didn't make her self-conscious the way being watched usually did. With him, she felt seen rather than observed. She had been trying not to think too hard about what that meant. When she came back to the table, the sky had gone dark, and the string lights had taken over, and the city below them was doing what cities do at night, glittering and restless and full of lives moving in every direction at once. She sat across from him and picked up her wine glass. He was looking at her in a way that was different from his usual way. She noticed it immediately because she had spent months learning the landscape of his expressions, and this one was new. It was the look of a man who had made a decision and was standing at the edge of it. Her pulse moved differently. "I need to tell you something," he said. She set her glass down. He leaned forward, both forearms on the table, and looked at her directly the way he always did when something mattered. "I don't want to get this wrong," he said, almost to himself. Then he looked up at her. "I've been trying to figure out the right time for months. There probably isn't one. So," he stopped, started again. "You're the one I've been waiting for," he said, quietly, like it had been true for so long. It was simply a fact he was finally saying out loud. "I know that probably sounds like too much. I know your history, and I know how carefully you move, and I'm not asking you to match what I feel right now. I just needed you to know it. That's all." The string lights moved slightly in the warm breeze. The city hummed below them. Imani looked at him across the small table and felt something in her chest open up and collapse at the same time, like a door swinging wide onto a room she wasn't prepared to enter. Her eyes filled. She didn't plan that. It just happened. And then something else happened that she could not have predicted and could not stop. His face in the candlelight, the way he leaned forward, the particular set of his shoulders in that gray shirt, the steadiness of him, the patience of him. Her mouth opened. "Sean," she said. It came out barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever been inside of. She watched it happen to his face, the way the openness of a moment before simply closed. Not in anger, not in coldness. Something worse than both of those things. Something that looked like a man watching the ground shift under his feet and having nowhere to step that was solid. He sat back slowly. He looked at the table. "Declan." Her voice broke on his name. "I don't know why I said that. I don't know where that came from. I'm so sorry." He was quiet for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were steady, but the skin around them was tight. "Did you know?" he asked. His voice was careful in the way voices get when the person using them is working very hard to stay level. "When you looked at me just now, did you see me?" "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, I see you. I always see you. Declan, I promise you I see you." "Then why did you say his name?" She pressed her hand flat on the table. Her throat was so tight it was hard to get words through it. "Because you made me feel safe," she said. "The way you just looked at me, what you said, I felt completely safe, and the last time I felt that way was with someone who is gone, and I think my heart got confused for 1 second. 1 terrible second." He looked at her hand on the table. He didn't cover it with his. "That's not a small thing, Imani." "I know. You said his name at the moment I told you." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "That's not something I can just set aside. I'm not asking you to set aside." "Then what are you asking?" She looked at him across the table. This man who had shown up 3 times before she noticed him, who had said okay when she said no, who had stood in her darkroom for 40 minutes without making a sound, who had texted her about a storm so she could photograph the sky, who had just opened himself completely and gotten his brother's name in return. "I'm asking you to let me explain," she said. "Not to fix it. I can't fix it. I'm asking you to stay at this table for 10 more minutes, and let me try to tell you what that was." He looked out at the city. A long moment passed. He picked up his wine glass and held it without drinking, the same way she had photographed him the first time, on a different rooftop, a man holding something and not consuming it. 10 minutes, he said. She took a breath. She told him about Marcus, more than she'd told him before. Not the facts of it. He knew the facts, but the feeling of it, what it did to the part of her that trusted her own instincts. How, for 2 years, any time something felt right, she went looking for where it was wrong, because she had missed it so badly before. how she had spent so long guarding the door that she had forgotten what she was guarding the door for. She told him about the feeling that came over her when he spoke, how it was the first time in 2 years that she had felt completely unguarded, completely held, and how that feeling had a memory attached to it, Sean's name attached to it. Because grief is not logical and the heart does not sort its files neatly. She told him she was not confused about who he was. She told him she knew exactly who he was. He listened to all of it without interrupting. The city moved below them. The string lights swayed. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. I spent 2 years after Sean died wondering if what I built was mine or his. He said, finally, whether the person showing up to work every day was me or just someone maintaining his vision. He set his glass down. I know what it is to not be sure who you are separate from your grief. She looked at him. That doesn't make what happened small, he said. I know. I need some time, he said. Not forever. Just some time. She nodded. Her eyes were burning, but she held it together. She stood up. He stood too, and for a moment they were closer than the table had allowed, and she could see everything in his face, the hurt and the care and confusion, and underneath all of it, still there, the thing he had said to her before it all broke open. She put her hand briefly against his chest. She felt his heart beating under her palm, fast and unsteady. I see you, Declan, she said quietly. Only you. She dropped her hand and walked to the rooftop door. She took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, she sat on a bench near the entrance and put her face in her hands and stayed there until the shaking in her chest settled enough that she could drive. Outside, the city kept moving, loud and lit, and completely indifferent to the fact that she had just said the wrong name at the most important moment of the last 2 years, and might have broken the best thing that had come into her life since she stopped believing good things came. She drove home. She didn't sleep. She gave him the time he asked for. That was the hardest thing she had done in 2 years. Harder than walking out of church in a wedding dress with nowhere to go. Harder than building a life out of the wreckage of that afternoon. Because at least then the decision had been made for her. This time she had to choose to wait. Had to choose to not call, not text, not drive past his house in the Garden District the way every anxious part of her wanted to. She worked instead. She shot 3 events in 10 days. A birthday party in Metairie for a woman turning 70 who danced the entire night. A product launch downtown that she got through on muscle memory alone. A small intimate wedding in City Park. Just 12 guests under the oak trees. The bride in a simple cream dress. The groom crying before she even reached him. Imani photographed it all and felt everything and showed nothing. At night, she went home to her studio and developed film in the darkroom and let the red light and the chemical smell and the slow emergence of images be the only thing she had to think about. It was the closest thing to meditation she had ever found. The patience required to stand in the dark and wait for something to appear. She thought about patience a lot that week. Rochelle called on day 4, and Imani told her everything. Rochelle listened without interrupting, which was how Imani knew she understood the severity of it. When Imani finished, Rochelle said, "Oh, baby, I know," his brother's name. "I know, Rochelle." At that exact moment, "I am aware of the timing, yes." Rochelle exhaled slowly. "What are you going to do?" "What he asked me to do. Give him time." "And if he doesn't come back?" Imani looked at the darkroom door, at the prints hanging in the red light, at the one she never took down, the rooftop shot, his profile against the city, the glass in his hand, the distance in his eyes that she now understood differently than she had when she first took it. "Then I'll know I had something real for a little while," she said. "And that was worth having even if it didn't stay." Rochelle was quiet for a moment. "That might be the most grown-up thing you've ever said. Don't make it weird. I'm serious. 2 years ago you would have decided it was a sign and closed the door and moved to a different city. I thought about moving to a different city. But you didn't." "But I didn't," Imani said. She hung up and sat in the quiet of the studio. Outside on Frenchman Street, the night was getting started, music threading to the walls the way it always did. The neighborhood breathing its particular kind of life. She had chosen this street because it was never silent. After Marcus, she couldn't stand silence. It had too much room in it for the wrong thoughts. Now she sat in it and let it be what it was. Just quiet, not empty. On the 7th day, her phone rang at 8 in the morning. She was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, still in the oversized t-shirt she slept in, hair wrapped, not ready for anything or anyone. She looked at the screen. Declan. Her heart did something immediate and embarrassing. She answered. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." A pause. Not uncomfortable. The kind of pause that meant something was being chosen carefully. "I've been thinking," he said. "I figured," she said. "Can I come over?" She looked down at her sleep shirt, her unwrapped hair situation, the coffee she hadn't finished, the studio in its usual organized chaos of equipment cases and prints, and the general evidence of a life lived at full creative speed. "Yes," she said. He arrived 20 minutes later. She had changed into jeans and a rust-colored blouse and done exactly nothing about her hair, which was out and natural and took up the space it took up, and she decided that was fine. If there was any moment in her life that called for being exactly as she was, unrehearsed and unpolished, it was probably this one. She opened the door before he knocked. He was in dark jeans and a navy jacket over a white shirt, and he looked like he hadn't slept a complete night in a week, which made 2 of them. He looked at her for a moment in the doorway. "Your hair," he said. She touched it self-consciously. "I know, I didn't have time to—" "It's beautiful," he said simply. Not a compliment designed to get somewhere, just a fact he was reporting. She stepped back and let him in. He looked around the studio the way he always did when he came here. Taking it in like he was updating a map, he kept internally. The prints on the walls, the equipment, the darkroom door. He stopped in front of a new print she'd hung 2 days ago, one from the City Park wedding. The groom crying before the bride reached him, the 12 guests watching, the oak trees overhead with their heavy arms. He looked at it for a long time. "You shot a wedding," he said. 3 events in 10 days. Kept busy. He turned from the print. "How was it? The wedding?" He cried before she got to him. She said, "Didn't even try to hold it together." Something moved across his face. "Good." She gestured to the small sitting area near the window. 2 chairs and a low table, the place she took clients when she needed to talk through a project. He sat. She sat across from him. Morning light came through the window between them. He leaned forward with his forearms on his knees and looked at her directly. "I've been thinking about Sean," he said. She waited. "When he died, I went through this period where I'd be in a meeting or on a call, and I'd think of something I want to tell him and reach for my phone before I remembered." He paused. It happened for about a year. Less and less, but it happened. The muscle memory of someone being there. She nodded slowly. "What you did on the rooftop," he said carefully. "I've been sitting with it all week trying to understand it, and I think I do. I don't think you confuse me with him. I think you felt something so big in that moment that it opened up everything, including the grief, and Sean was in the grief." He looked at her. "Is that close to what happened?" Her throat tightened. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what happened." He nodded, looked at his hand for a moment. "I was hurt," he said. "I want to be honest with you about that. Not because you did something wrong, just because it hit something in me that was already tender. Sean's name in that moment." He stopped. "It made me wonder if I was ever going to be just myself to anyone, or if I was always going to be partly his shadow." "You are not his shadow," she said. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "Declan, you are the most fully yourself person I have ever stood next to. That is why I felt what I felt on that rooftop. Not because you reminded me of someone else. Because you are entirely, specifically you." He looked at her for a long moment. The morning light sat between them. "I know that," he said quietly. "I think I needed to hear you say it." She leaned forward. "I see you. I have been seeing you in the gallery in Treme, when you stood in front of a photograph of 2 people who'd been together 53 years, and asked me the number like it mattered to you. I saw you on a rooftop holding a glass of whiskey and looking at a city like you were trying to find something in it. I saw you stand in my darkroom for 40 minutes without making a sound because you understood that was a sacred space." She felt her eyes burning again, and this time she didn't try to manage it. I see every specific thing about you, and none of it is anyone else's shadow. It is yours." He stood up from his chair. She stood too. He crossed the small space between them and put his hands on either side of her face and looked at her for a moment, close enough that she could see the amber in his eyes clearly, the tiredness in them, the relief beginning to move through them like light through water. Then he pressed his forehead to hers, and they stood like that in the morning light coming through the studio window, not kissing yet, just breathing the same air, her hands coming up to rest on his forearms, both of them staying the moment before the moment, because sometimes that space is the most important part. "Don't move to London," he said quietly. She let out a sound that was almost a laugh. "I wasn't planning to." "Good," he said. And then he kissed her. It was not the kind of kiss that announced itself. It was a kind that arrives like something that has been true for a long time and is simply now being said out loud, unhurried, certain, the way he did everything. Outside on Frenchman Street, the city was waking up. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing a trumpet, slow and warm, the notes drifting through the studio window and filling up all the space in the room. Imani had photographed 247 weddings. She knew what love looked like through a lens. She was beginning to understand what it felt like from the inside, and it felt like morning light, and a man who said okay when he meant stay, and a city playing music just because it knew how. What would you rate this story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means the world. Ready for the next story? It's even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.